Hello there and welcome back to the Net Report. Chris here, and we are already a month into a free agency period that has been absolutely wild. We have seen some major moves, surprise signings, and teams completely revamp their rosters into title contenders. But through all that chaos, there are a few big name players that have yet to sign their contracts and are sort of hanging in limbo. One thing they all have in common is that they are all restricted free agents. So today I am here to discuss the future for these restricted free agents and whether or not I think they will sign these long-term deals they have been looking for. First, we have Cam Thomas of the Brooklyn Nets. And Cam Thomas, like many other restricted free agents, was looking for a payday this offseason. Many thought he could command between $25 and $30 million a year on a 4-year contract. However, talks have stalled with the Nets, and it is becoming clear that Cam Thomas and the Nets are pretty far apart on a long-term contract extension. Cam Thomas comes off a season where he only played 25 games due to a nagging hamstring injury, and in those games, he definitely filled up the stat sheet, averaging 24 points per game on 44% shooting from the field and 35% from three. Not the most impressive efficiency, however, for a scoring guard, it certainly isn't bad by any stretch. According to Jake Fisher of Bleacher Report, he sees himself as one of the most elite playmaking scorers in the NBA and wants to be compensated as such. There seems to, however, be a significant gap between what Thomas is seeking and what the Nets have offered. According to Fisher, the Nets have only offered Cam Thomas a 2-year deal with a team option on the second year, worth up to around $14 million a year, which seems extremely low compared to what Cam Thomas and many others thought he would be receiving this offseason. A big reason for this, along with every other restricted free agent not receiving offers, is there just isn't enough money to go around. There are no salary cap teams left in free agency aside from the Nets, so they are basically bidding against themselves. Many executives feel Cam Thomas is not worth a huge amount of money per year despite his scoring output due to his lack of defense, small frame, and lack of efficiency from the field. We even saw this reported from NBA insider Zach Lowe, which started a very interesting back and forth on Twitter, in which Zach Lowe reported that the consensus around many executives in the NBA is that Cam Thomas is an empty calorie ball hog type of player. This of course caused Cam Thomas to respond and go off, and that has only added to the drama that has been all throughout this whole contract negotiation. Jake Fisher and many others feel the most likely scenario is that Cam Thomas signs his qualifying offer this year for just under $6 million and becomes an unrestricted free agent next year in the hopes of getting paid. Cam Thomas is definitely someone who I saw getting paid this summer, and it is quite surprising and bizarre how this has all played out, especially for a team like the Nets who are not necessarily looking to be good or contend next season. I thought they would offer him at least $20 million a year, let him ball out, and eventually maybe use him as a trade chip down the line, but it seems the Nets are sticking to their guns, and only time will tell if a long-term contract is reached between Cam Thomas and the Nets. Next, we have Josh Giddy of the Chicago Bulls, who had a career year last season, averaging 14.6 points, 8.1 rebounds, and 7.2 assists per game. Where he really turned it on, however, was after All-Star break, where he averaged 21.2 points, 10.7 rebounds, and 9.3 assists per game in his final 19 games. He shot 50% from the field during that stretch and 46% from three. This career season, of course, came with expectations of a big payday for Josh Giddy. However, similar to Cam Thomas of the Nets, the Bulls have been reluctant to give Josh Giddy the contract extension he desires. Josh Giddy went into free agency seeking $30 million per year annually on a long-term deal. However, the Bulls have only offered him close to $20 million per year, according to Bleacher Report's Jake Fisher. This back and forth has led to a stalemate between Giddy and the Chicago Bulls organization, with many wondering if Giddy will get that long-term extension he wants at $30 million per year. The Bulls, of course, are hesitant to offer such a huge contract to Giddy due to that impressive sample size being right after All-Star break, what many feel is the dead point of the season. We often see many players break out in the final months of the season, such as March and April, then regress back to their old form come playoff time or at the beginning of next season. We, of course, see this every year with many players, and it is very difficult to evaluate if it is a true breakout for a player or just a hot streak to end the season. I don't necessarily see Josh Giddy as an all-star type of player. I think the best version of him requires the ball to be in his hand, like we saw in Chicago this past season, but I could see him being a very good player, maybe a tier below an all-star. Josh Giddy, like every other restricted free agent, does have a qualifying offer up to $11.1 million. And while I think there is a chance he accepts that qualifying offer to ensure he gets a bigger payday next season, I think the two will eventually come to some sort of median. It just may take a while. I don't expect Josh Giddy to get $30 million per year, but I could see him getting between $24 and $25 million a year. The Bulls are, of course, going to be a lot more careful, especially after the terrible contract they ended up giving Patrick Williams a couple years back. However, I do eventually see both sides coming to some sort of agreement. If I had to guess, I would estimate 4 years, $100 million for Josh Giddy, but let me know in the comments if you think that's too much money for Josh Giddy and what you think the Bulls should offer him. Next, we have Jonathan Kaminga of the Golden State Warriors, and this one is perhaps the strangest one of them all, and I think this has the biggest chance for some sort of sign-and trade. Jonathan Kaminga comes off a season where he averaged 15.3 points, 4.6 rebounds, and 2.2 assists per game in just 24 minutes per game. However, despite an okay season statistically, his role did drop off significantly this year, with Steve Kerr electing to keep Kaminga out of crucial late-game scenarios, even eventually being cut out of the playoff rotation entirely during the Rockets series. Kaminga seems to be hoping for a bigger role, and there is no guarantee the Warriors are willing to give that to him. Jonathan Kaminga went into free agency looking for about $25 million per year. However, talks stalled quickly with the Warriors, with both sides being pretty far off in terms of negotiations. Due to his limited role last year and Steve Kerr's reluctance to play him in crunch time/big games, it is no surprise that the Warriors are hesitant to pay Kaminga such a large sum of money. This has led many to believe that Kaminga may be stuck having to accept his qualifying offer this year to prove himself for a bigger payday next year. However, on the contrary, many think that there is a chance for a sign-and-trade scenario. Teams like the Sacramento Kings and Phoenix Suns have been linked to Kaminga, and it would definitely be in his interest for a sign-and-trade if it ends up giving him a bigger role as a starter, which is something Kaminga and his agent really want. Kaminga, of course, has a lot of refining to do in his game before becoming a mainstay at the NBA level. We saw his efficiency dip from the field quite a bit this year, and I really think there's a chance the Warriors look to move on from Kaminga, and that a team like the Kings, the Nets, or so on could be a great fit for him and give him more minutes to help him improve his game. I think the most likely scenario is that he ends up opting into his qualifying offer to start the season, and he more than likely will probably be traded midway into the season or right before the season, especially with the reports that the Warriors are really trying to maximize his value. Finally, the last restricted free agent I wanted to talk about was Quinton Grimes of the Philadelphia 76ers. Quinton Grimes was an interesting case heading into this offseason, as he got traded from the Dallas Mavericks to the 76ers at the trade deadline and had by far the best run of his career, averaging 21.9 points, 5.2 rebounds, and 4.5 assists per game, shooting 37% from 3 and 47% from the field. This, of course, like we mentioned while talking about Josh Giddy, came after All-Star break, and with that comes the reluctance of expecting this being the norm for Quinton Grimes heading forward. He certainly proved he can be an efficient, high-volume scorer. However, it was as the first option on a very bad and injured 76ers team, and it now comes to the question if the 76ers are willing to pay him top dollar. Quinton Grimes went into free agency expecting upwards of $25 million per year. However, that reality quickly vanished due to the state of restricted free agents and limited cap space teams around the league. He had a great stretch to end the year. However, like Jake Fisher reported, he would be the fourth option on the 76ers if they are fully healthy, so we should not expect a hefty payday from the 76ers. With no other teams really able to offer much due to the lack of cap space around the league, many expect Grimes to return to the 76ers on a 2 to 3 year deal for just over the mid-level. This is a deal that would not surprise me, and while the qualifying offer is definitely an option, Grimes has only made $11 million throughout his NBA career, and I would expect him to cash in even if it's not for that grand contract he was expecting. I think a 3-year contract in the range of $45 million a year at $15 million a year is pretty reasonable. The only other option I see is a sign and trade. However, I expect Philly to try to hold on to Grimes since he fits their team and system so well, and he may not command as much as the other restricted free agents we have talked about throughout this video. Anyways, that's what we think will happen with the remaining restricted free agents that are left throughout this free agency period. Please let us know in the comment section below where you think these contract negotiations will end up for each of these players, and if you think any of them may be on the move. As always, if you enjoy this type of content and want to see more, hit that like and subscribe button to keep up to date with all of our NBA content this offseason. Your support is very much appreciated, and it helps the channel out a ton. As always, thank you for tuning in, and have a great one.